even see some of you people when you go to restaurants before you eat and you pray? I mean, I am one of those creepy priests that watches you while you eat. And they're always so embarrassed. They're like, but do you know that this prayer was actually something that protected our faith? I mean, the history of it all talks about Constantine going into battle. You can learn all about that when you come with me on a pilgrimage available at platinggrace.com/travel. And basically, we'll go to the Melvian Bridge where he was fighting for. Constantine wasn't Christian. His mother was. Helen, the one who founded the cross, fighting against Maxentius, who would make ISIS look like sissies. And he was war-weary, fighting after fighting after fight, just to protect Rome. Why? Because he had what was called religious freedom. He was the one who actually guaranteed Christianity to be practiced without getting killed. So people hated him for it. That's why Rome is literally kind of the center of our faith. One would think, why not Constantinople or why not Jerusalem? Well, because I'll be honest with you, they're a little less organized than Romans are. I have no idea what happened with Italians, but I'm just saying that at one point, Rome was the center of organization, urbi et orbe, where the Holy Father speaks from his window. It's called like the center of the world. And so anyway, Jesus knew that, Peter knew that, all of old-time history knew that, but he goes there to fight. But the day before he goes into battle, he receives this vision, this locution, this message. This happens even now. People are still hearing God speak to them. Go figure. And he heard, in hoc signo vinces. I know that's a Latin phrase. Many people don't speak Latin, but at one point, even dogs understood Latin, okay? So let's learn a little bit of it. In hoc signo, in this sign, vinces, you will be victorious. So what did he do? He put a cross on his armor, his shield, their helmets, their banners, and they looked fashionable. But they also looked stupid. Could you imagine if this was a wall to protect me and I had a big cross on my forehead? I wonder where the enemy is. You see what he did? He literally turned all of his fighting forces into what? A big target. And I think that's one of the reasons why we are almost half-hearted in doing this, because we do not want to be seen, because if we are seen as standing up for our faith, we will be canceled. And so what I'm asking you to do is not just simply take all of this stuff in. I'm asking you to go out there and do exactly what we say at Mass. Ita missa est. And that means Mass is finished. And what do you all say? Thanks be to God. But don't forget that the word missa from the Latin mittere literally means to send. And so literally you are being, like if we were to conjugate mittere, missio, missionis, a missionary, someone who sent, I send you a missive, I send something, I dismiss you, I send something away. Missa is the same root word as missile, which is kind of how fast you all leave after church. It's like Mass is ended, go in 3, 2, and you launched out of there, and you know what a missile does, right? King Jong-un. You all know what a missile does. It gets launched, and then what does it what happens? It explodes, but explodes with what? What's ever inside the missile. And at the end of Mass, who or what is inside of you? Jesus. And how did he get there? And what I want to do is feed you today. I'll be honest with you. A lot of people on this trip, I mean, it's fine with me. It doesn't really matter. Some didn't exactly know what my role was because I'm just the cooking priest on EWTN every Friday at Sundays at 4:30 Eastern. So they're like, what does that food have to do with faith? And what does that food to do with like my marriage? Well, I will tell you. After I wrote my book, Grace Before Meals, because the whole idea of a cooking priest somehow was somewhat neat, and that was a book to bring back feast days. I wrote a book, and it became a bestseller. And so anyway, when I wrote the follow-up book, it was really, that book was to help families get closer together. And I realized in prayer, the only way families are going to get closer together is if mom and dad are close together. And so I wrote a book called Spicing Up Married Life. And I know what some of you are thinking. Dude, you're a priest. I mean, like, what do you know about marriage? Well, I'll tell you. I knew enough I didn't want to get married. Okay. And I'm not saying it in an insulting fashion. I knew because God told me that my vocation is not to marriage. It's a beautiful vocation I have as a priest. And you have a beautiful marriage vocation. And while you guys think, oh, you priests sacrifice so much, I get my own bathroom. And yeah, you're like, yeah, but you also have to be poor. Men? And moms of children, you're poor too. And you're like, you know what? But you kind of have to also be chaste. You know, and in some cases with unmarried priests like myself, because we know that in our Latin tradition and our Eastern Rite traditions, there are married priests. We all have to practice chastity, don't you? And you're like, oh, but people don't realize this. The hardest vow I make is obedience to the bishop and my superior and also my spouse, the church. Obedience is hard. Husbands, isn't it? Don't you have to be obedient too? I mean, St. Paul talked about it in that letter that nobody likes reading because it says, women, be obedient to your husbands. But they get angry about it. And so they forget to realize that there's a second part. That second part that says, and husbands, love your wives as Christ loves his church. How much does Christ love his church? I'll tell you. He loves us so much, he literally listens to us. Whine and complain and gripe and get angry, also known as prayer. He's actually listening to us because that's what love does. And so I know it still sounds kind of strange that I wrote this book, but I really wanted to go on a mission with God. God literally put it in my heart to put this book together to talk about how stupid anniversaries are. And now all the women here are like, I don't like Father Leo anymore. And all the guys are like, shh, honey, just listen to him. And when I say stupid, I'm not being insulting. I'm just speaking a little Latin here. Stupid, stupor, sleepy, slow. Why do you people wait once a year to celebrate your love? With 12 chapters, you could celebrate month-iversaries, monthly dinner dates. And now the women are like, I like him and I like that book. And the guys are like, Father Leo, shut up. Because all I want you to do at dinner, on these dinner dates, because the book has chapters that go through the stages of marriage, like, for example, love at first sight. By the way, did you all have experience of love at first sight? Do not answer that question publicly, okay? Because maybe you don't understand what I meant. When I say love at first sight, it wasn't like, man, she's hot, and like, oh, he's a hottie. No. True love at first sight was, when was the first time you saw God's presence in your spouse? And you're like, who? That means that she or he would have to see God's presence in me. And you're like, I don't know if that's going to be the case. And here's the problem. We might not be looking at each other with God's presence in our own life. In other words, if God is in your life, you will see with God's eyes, and you will see the presence of God in the other person, the same way Mother Teresa, when she saw like a poor person sitting in his or her own squalor, would be like, there's Jesus. We got to be able to look at each other with God's eyes. And so this book goes from, from the moment you first met to death do you part. And one of the most difficult chapters, how to love your in-laws in God's laws, very popular chapter. Also, how do you make up with your fights? And just things like that with theological essays, questions, as well as, recipes for two. And so it's been very popular, been very helpful. In fact, RetroVi uses it in some of its chapters because it's just a way to get you to talk. And I firmly believe that if you have really good food at the table, you will listen to each other because you can't talk with your mouth full. And if there's one place where true marriage occurs, it's going to be at a feast. And every time you invite Jesus to the table, you will be platinggrace.com. And basically, in that moment, you will experience what marriage looks like. It will look like a true communion. Have you ever seen Rublev's icon of the Trinity? Which, by the way, your marriage is supposed to image? Because marriage ain't a union of two people. It's a union of three. Man, woman, and God, who is love. And that's why Rublev's icon shows them all sitting at a table. Because at that communion, you celebrate the highest point of Mass, which is the consummation of Mass. Consummation, when the priest receives the Eucharist. That's why in certain rites, in old rites, that's when the bell would ring another time, right? It's like ding, 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 pay attention. A climactic experience just occurred. God not only became present, God wanted to enter into you, which is why that same language, consummation, is what is legally used for canon law to describe when a marriage is validated, when a marriage is truly consummated, when man and woman become one through that great act. And so I know this is getting kind of deep so early in the morning, and some of you are wondering, how much coffee did Father Leo drink this morning? Well, I had plenty because I'm an hour late. And I'm an hour late because I'm Filipino. No. So what I want to do is I want to share with you before you kind of go out in the day, just some thoughts about, what I'm experiencing in marriage preparation as well as marriage counseling with the kind of unique work that I do with food. So a lot of people have asked, and I want to be able to kind of just do a quick summary so that you don't feel like you don't know who I am or what kind of priest I am. So many people have asked, what kind of priest are you? The answer is a weird one. All right, so Bishop laughed the hardest with that joke. Because I am in a unique situation. I was a diocesan priest for the Archdiocese of Baltimore. I was ordained 22 years ago. And since then, I entered into consecrated life after 12 years of diocesan priesthood, where I was priest, administrator, associate. I was working at a seminary. I was also working at prison system. I felt God calling me to something, especially out of this whole food and faith movement, because in the middle of all this, I cook. I studied at the Cordon Bleu in Perugia while I was in seminary. I took cooking courses because it's called a hobby. I was already a pretty skilled cook working in restaurants, and because I'm my mother's favorite child, I actually started taking lessons with her. She's a home economics teacher. The bishop kicks me out of the country, sends me to seminary in Italy. I study culinary there. I come back with my love for spreading the gospel and also my cooking skills, and that became a thing to the point where some guy approached me and said, we should put this on TV, and I said, over my resurrected body. I didn't get ordained to, have a cooking show on Sundays at 4:30 Eastern, and so It just started to grow and grow and grow with books, and then all of a sudden, I get a phone call from the Food Network. Long story short, and I'll tell you what happened, but just long story short, I get invited to a competition against Bobby Flay on the Food Network Throwdown, Season 7, Episode 1. And I beat him in this competition, right? No, please stop. I cheated. I put holy water in the marinade, okay? That's kind of what I did. No, I didn't do that. I will tell you how I beat him at my next talk on Saturday at 3 p.m. Y'all see what I did there? I just kind of dangled a carrot in front of you because I know right now, especially in the world today, the devil dangles carrots in front of us all the time. And it's almost like we, priests and the deacons and this Good News Cruise, we literally had to entice you to go to the flippin' Caribbean just so that we can talk to you about marriage. We had to entice you with amazing food. We had to entice you with Father Mike Schmitz, which is clear. What we have to do is show you that guess what? All of those places that we visited, they're Catholic. And it was beautiful. And all we're trying to do is root you back to who we are if we are not afraid to. In the name of the Father, live, move, and breathe, and have our being. So what I want you all to do is not just simply take this all in, but I need to turn you all into missiles and send you out there and explode with the information that you have. But oftentimes people will ask, I don't know how to talk to my kids about marriage. I don't know how to defend the Catholic understanding of marriage in a world that is just so horrible to marriage. Horrible to marriage. So what I want to do is offer you some tips. And you're probably like, oh, God, what kind of tips are you going to give? I'm going to give you TIPS, tips. And the first tip is try thinking theologically. That's it. And when I say try, I think it's because our world has given up. And I mean, with all due respect to all of our Catholic bishops and pastors, it's almost like in the past 2 years, doesn't it feel like we've just given up trying? It's like, oh gosh, something can kill us, and we kind of give up. The last time I checked, we have to keep trying to live theologically. And what does theology tell us? You're going to die anyway. And I never want to look at what's going on in the world is in a careless way. I want us to be cautious. The church has always had rules on these things. If you're sick or prone to getting sick, please stay home. Call us. We will come to you with Jesus. If you can't come to us, we will come to you. That is us trying. You know what that word is in Latin? Provare. We're trying. Same word as prove. We're proving our faith to you. Thinking, because that doesn't happen anymore. We have replaced faith with feelings. We have replaced faith with fact. That's why people will say, oh, do you really believe in that? Prove it. And we always have to say that faith isn't fact. And faith isn't feeling. It's a different root understanding. Faith is faith. And St. Paul gives that to us. Having a belief in something that we do not see. An expectation of that which we know we can hope for. You're never going to be able to prove faith to atheists. You can show them reasons to believe, but you can't ever prove it. But I can tell you the most convincing examples of faith are saints. And that's why you're supposed to become one. By the way, can I ask you, how many of you here want to get to heaven? Just want to? Oh, okay, pretty good. Some of you are still thinking about it. Okay, then let me ask you another follow-up question. How many of you are going to become saints? Raise your hand. Okay, this is kind of awkward. Like there was a wife like, I am, and the husband's like, I'm not. Then maybe the problem is you're not thinking theologically. Let me give you the definition of theology, a definition of theology, which a lot of people don't understand. And I'm going to give it to you through a German understanding. I learned this from a priest in Germany. When I lived in Italy and studied, I was taught by some German Jesuits. And he gave me this equation to help you to become theologians, because guess what? We're all supposed to become theologians. You're supposed to all have the logic of the theo, right? I mean, that's what theology is, the logic of the theo. But a lot of people, because if you don't do that, then you can only live your life by the logic of the biology, which is how some people view marriage. It's only a biological reality. But these days, biology doesn't exist, right? Or you can think of it only as a psychological reality. It's in the mind. If I say we're married, even if we've never even committed ourselves to each other. That's where the hookup culture or the premarital relationship has kind of replaced theology. Or worse, you could actually look at marriage through the logic of socio, approaching marriage only the way society views marriage. If you want that, you go ahead. But I want you to at least become theologians, because a theology person knows that theology practices this equation. It's called Gestalt. It's German, because I'm German. And at least in the clarity that we need, Gestalt is, and I'm going to draw this out, and you can draw this on your paper too, is the whole is greater than the total sum of parts. Okay, let me show you that again. The whole is greater than the total sum of parts. And what does that mean? Well, let me explain it this way. Total sum of parts would kind of be like a box of puzzle pieces. The whole is when you put it all together. Which is better? You know. And unfortunately, marriage, when you walk into marriage, and probably even now, you still have a bunch of pieces in your life that you haven't really put it together. When I was a kid, I know this is going to be surprising to you, but I was kind of hyper. And shut up, in a Christian way, all right? And so I was hyper. So to keep me occupied, my mom and dad gave me like a box of puzzle pieces and like 1,000 pieces, and I was done in 20 minutes. And it's not because I was brilliant, because they would come over and be like, I'm done. And then they would walk over and he's like, okay. They saw what I did. They realized that if I didn't know where the pieces fit, I found scissors and made them fit, right? Like, and if it looks like a mess, it's because I was not following the logic of the one who made that picture in the first place. We are putting pieces together and things, and we're kind of rushing through it. We're even leaving parts out of our marriage because we don't know where it goes, and so we pretend like we have it all together. Marriage is a process of theologically trying to find out how these pieces of our lives fit together according to God's plan, including the pieces of your family members who are wackadoodle crazy, including the pieces of like brokenness that you might have brought into your marriage. As much as you want to get rid of it, it's a piece in the puzzle. How is it going to be part of this overall picture? I think what we're doing oftentimes is we're forgetting theology. So please try thinking theologically. The next piece is called I, which I'm just going to call integrate inspiring information. And why do I say that? Is because we no longer practice the three phases of marriage. So like when people come to me for marriage preparation, it's so funny. They actually come to celibate priests for marriage preparation. And people always have to ask, like, well, what do these guys know? Well, we do know this, especially from St. John Paul II's understanding of marriage and the dignity of it, that there are three phases of marriage preparation. One is called the remote, the proximate, and the immediate. The immediate is when I see them. It's like they're immediately preparing to get married. The remote is what they experienced in marriage preparation when they were growing up. As kids, what did they see about marriage? From their own families, from their in-laws, from the neighborhood. And then the proximate marriage preparation is when they were old enough to figure out, maybe I'm called to get married. So they begin dating, also now known as just having casual sex. Also known as the hookup culture. You can see how at every stage of marriage preparation, prior to the immediate, before coming to me, is screwed up. People are growing up in very broken situations, and this is no judgment. This is for you to understand your children and grandchildren, all right? I'm not the only one supposed to talk about marriage. You are. So give them a good remote experience of marriage. Show them what it looks like to love, how to fight, how to make up, how to have fun. And in the proximate, teach them that teach them that dating is not about simply finding the right person. It's about finding who you are. Learning more about you so that you can share that freely with the other person. That's what that proximate relationship is about. And then, of course, when it comes to the immediate, all couples want to talk about with me is, how many candles can we have at the altar? Can my dog walk the ring? You know, things like that. Like, it's like, can we play, Up Where We Belong as my walking down aisle music? And I'm like, yeah, if we can play Tantum Ergo as your first dance. So yeah, sure, we can do that. So all they want to do is just talk about the wedding ceremony. And so let me tell you, the first thing I say, because it's my job to have them integrate inspiring information. First of all, I never greet my couples with anger and frustration the way some churches do because they want to protect marriage, protect the sanctity of marriage. So the first thing that couples get from a lot of the churches is all the rules and regulations. I recommend that you talk to your pastors right now and provide a little bit more of a pastoral approach to marriage preparation, where the first thing they got at my church was a gift box. And the gift box said, "Thank you for coming to our church in your desire to seek marriage. We have a few gifts for you. Here's an album. Please take pictures along the way so that you have a memory of this." You can see we got excited for them. We got excited for them. If they're coming to the Catholic Church to want to get married, please, let's not give them rules and regulations. Let's give them our love and support and use this time as an opportunity to integrate inspiring information, because a lot of people think that marriage is just a ceremony, when in fact it is an opportunity to die to self. I mean, like, you guys are, I know you're married because you're all here, but what are your names? Harry? And? Mary and Rick. Okay, how many years have you been married, Mary and Rick? 52 years. That is beautiful. So 52 years, Mary and Rick celebrated their own funeral. And let me tell you why. Because in time, and this is what I learned at seminary about priesthood, because guess what? There are two sacraments that bring holiness into this world. You know what it is? It's ordination, or a consecrated life, and marriage. We share something, because 22 years ago, Leo Patalinghug died to self. And remember that marriage is a decision. And this is the informational piece that I want to stress with you. That this is a time for us to not only enter into a new life, but it becomes the step to eternal life. But all they want to do is just live. But really, what they have to do is die to sinfulness and die to self. And so they're making a decision. 52 years ago, Mary and Rick decided to get married. It's a great word that we have to inform people about, and it's inspiring, because that word decision comes from the Latin decidere, and the verb cidere literally means to kill. So if you commit a homicidere, homicide, a suicidere, suicide. Do you remember when Congress used to work? They actually had a phrase, and they would say, "kill the bill." That was make a decision. And so when I made a decision to become a priest, Leo Patalinghug died. And I rose up from the floor, consecrated as Father Leo Patalinghug, even if I look like an altar boy still. And when you guys got married, Rick decided to marry Mary, which means Alexis, Sarah, and Bethany are dead to him now. And if Rick messes up on the marriage, Mary kills Rick. You see? I mean, it's a very serious decision. No, I'm kidding with you. No. But it is a matter of life and death. And I can tell you this because I know when people have gotten separated, they feel like a part of them has died. I'm going to talk a little bit very briefly about the annulment process, just very briefly. And simply because I don't want to get into the weeds, but I think it's good information. Because a lot of people think that Catholics believe in divorce. And we have never believed in divorce because, again, if you think theologically, Jesus never believed in it either. But he did give us a church with information that basically says that maybe your previous commitment wasn't theological. Maybe you got married for biological reasons, if you know what I mean. Or for psychological reasons because you just don't want to be alone. Or for sociological reasons because, everyone else is doing it. So what the annulment process does, it gets to the heart of what you knew and believe. And it's a little bit of a journey process, but I got to tell you, it is the most healing process of all. It's one of the most healing processes the church has to offer because it puts in place that puzzle piece so that you can eventually, and God willing, have that fuller picture of what marriage is really about. It helps you to look at something that might have been dark and frightening and scary and sad, but it's literally just you taking that with the pastoral loving hands of the church and putting it in the right place of your life. I hope that helps. That's what the annulment process is all about. That is inspiring information. We don't have to be afraid of the church's laws and regulations, because laws and regulations mean we give a caring rip about what we are personally and publicly and to everybody else. All right, so let's T-I and P. Let's practice parental purity. Practice parental purity. Please show to your kids proper affection. Show them what it looks like to love somebody and literally be kind of turned on by your spouse. You're kind of allowed to. I mean, isn't that why y'all got married? To make it not embarrassing anymore? I mean, I think what we've got to do is show the beauty of what purity does in even a physical conjugal relationship. It shows the beauty of unity. I remember my own mom and dad, okay, like in the Philippines, we're very affectionate people. That's why I do think I'm kind of German. I mean, my last name is Patalinghug. And I loved social distancing. I really did. No, I'm kidding with you. I actually can't stand the term, don't like it at all. It's bad branding, which is exactly what the world does. They take something good and they make it really bad, right? Because social just basically means friendly, friendship. That's why people who are in the Society of Jesus, the SJs, Jesuits, they are friends with Jesus. Yup. Jesus is friends with Jesuits. And that's good, because that means, guess what? We can be friends with each other. And I sometimes don't see that. I don't see friendliness. I don't see like playfulness. I don't see that. Remember, thank God, Catholics, we're not Puritans. And when I say practice, it does take practice. How do you show affection? Do you remember when you first started holding hands? Wasn't that awkward? It was so awkward. Or was it natural? And then you get good at something when you practice it, whether it be piano or cooking. You got to practice this pure kind of parenting. Because parenting, I don't know if you know this, and the bishop yesterday talked about it in his beautiful homily. Parenting is about being open to life. It is shocking that they actually branded Planned Parenthood, because it doesn't plan parenthood. It destroys parenting. Show to your children, and Kimberly talked about it yesterday too when she mentioned it's like, I'm fertile, don't touch me. I love to tell my couples, practice what it's gonna be like as parents if you are married and you already have some children and you just kind of went away. How do you show love for each other? And let me tell you, you don't show it with just a part of your body. Because frankly, and I tell couples this, and please don't think I'm being crass or anything, I'm just being very biological. This is the logic of the bio, and I can talk about it because guess who made biology? Theology made biology. And therefore, we have to use our body according to theological plans. And so I tell people, you know what? You're young, you're vibrant, you're beautiful. Go for it in a pure way. Because only if you have a pure heart will you see God, even in that sexual relationship. That conjoining physical love. It's beautiful. But we gotta be careful. We gotta be careful because there are other logics that wanna come into our mind. And so it just requires us to practice it. In the same way we say practice our faith, practice natural family planning. And one of the best ways you can practice pure parenting is to pray together. Praying together. And I know that sounds so basic, but it's not actually getting done, because I will even talk to my couples when they come. I'm like, have you guys, and I'm not being kind of nosy or creepy, but it's part of the prenuptial investigation. We got to ask them, like how many, they ask, how do you plan on having children in this marriage? That's the bishop's question. Are you open to life? I'll ask just another question. I say, how many children would you like to have? Because they're planning these things. And they'll be like, 2. And I'm like, oh, that's good. It's good. How do you plan on getting to that number 2? Because I can guarantee you're going to probably engage in that sexual act more than 2 times. How are you going to do that? And then I'm going to ask them also, I was like, and at present, are you physically engaged in a marital act? Because guess what? You could have those 2 children before you get married, or you could at least conceive 1 before you get married. And it's no judgment. I just know this, that the world's struggle sexually right now is not because we're evil people. And it's not because we're a bunch of perverts. It's because we've failed to practice the purity. We're not practicing purity anymore. But purity doesn't make you look like a Puritan. Purity makes you look like a light. That shows what true love is. And so I tell the couples, I want you to have an incredible life together. But you got to remember that loving each other isn't shown with just one part of your body. Because there's going to be a part in your time in your life when his won't work and hers won't want to. Does that mean you don't love each other anymore? No. So show love in other ways. Like a massage. You know? Or like, how about just kisses and cuddles? How about doing dishes? How about one really important part, sexual part of your body? You know what it is? Your ears. Don't get kinky, people, all right? I'm just thinking one of the most greatest turn-ons for the other is when you know the other person is listening to you. Because you feel loved, seen, heard. We use that expression all the time, right? And so I want us to practice practical purity and use all parts of our bodies to love the other person. There are other parts of our bodies that can love the other person. That's why in the RCIA ritual, there's a part where we literally bless all parts of our bodies. That's why Mary is a perfect image of obedience and love, because she didn't just love God with one part of her body. She gave her whole body. That's why her body was assumed into heaven, soul and body, because she didn't just simply practice her faith in her heart. No, in every part of her body, which is why, by the way, they say that if you want to get to heaven, when you get to heaven, the body that you're going to have in your resurrected body, it's actually the body you had when you were 33 years old. That's what they say. Because that was the perfect age, right? When Jesus died and rose again. It's pretty cool. That's why when I was 32, I did push-ups and sit-ups every day. Because I wanted to look good, which is rooted in that practicing pure parenting. Don't use your age or your physical whatever to be a reason for you not to be beautiful. Work on becoming beautiful for your spouse. You heard Kimberly and even Scott say that yesterday. You know, my mom and dad, they are beautiful people. They're 82, 84. They've been married so many years. I wrote that book, Spicing Up Married Life, in honor of my mom and dad's 50th anniversary because I'm their favorite child. And my mom looked at me and goes, "Why are you giving me this book? I've been married to your dad for 50 years. I said, "Just read the dumb book, Mom. I wrote it for you and Dad," right? So a few weeks later, I come by just surprise visit. My mom's dressed. And I'm like, "Damn, girl, you look good." Like, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Reading your book." What a gift. What a gift. Please look beautiful for your spouse. But I guarantee you, the more you look beautiful for your spouse, the more you're going to be a target. Like this. The more you become more close to Christ, the more the targets are going to come after you. That's why you have to practice the last ingredient of my tip, right? Which is the S word. You know what the S word is, right? What is it? You guys are too Catholic. I'm going to tell you what the S word is. Sacrifice. What did you think I was going to say? Awkward. But not just any sacrifice. Sincere, sacrificial service. These are the 3 words that I kind of want to give you about how to kind of keep your marriage strong and united. Sincere, sacrificial service. Sincere, I love it, from the Latin words sine cere. Without, sine cere, wax. Huh? I don't get it. Well, let me tell you, like back in the day when they would transport, statues from like Egypt to Rome or to Greece, and they were on these ships, and they were kind of like statue here, and then it would take a wave, and they would crack the arm, and there would be a gaping hole there. And so, like, very crafty sellers would put wax in the crack of the broken statue. But a good buyer would look at that statue and say, "Esta statua es sincere? Is this statue sincere? Is this without wax?" Now, there's brokenness in us. Do you put wax in your cracks? Oh, hold on, that sounded weird. Okay. Hold on, because some do. I'm just saying. But what do you put in your brokenness to make you look complete? A lot of people put on titles. A lot of people put on like clothes or even attitudes. But that's in that hole. That's where we have to put on sincerity. Here I am, future wife, in all of my brokenness. But you know what I'm going to put in my brokenness? God's love through you. God's love coming through you. So spouses, please know your spouses are broken. What are you going to fill it with? Anger, frustration, impatience. Because, marriage has always been seen as two becoming one. Two becoming one. Imagine like a cup of water. This is you, man. A cup of water. This is you, woman. You, man, are going to pour yourself into her. And you're going to feel very vulnerable and empty. But is that the end of the story? No, because she is going to pour herself into you. That's the sincerity of true self-mutual giving. You are no longer going to see life through just your eyes. Men, you can't just look at the world through football, beer, and stinky feet. You have to literally look at the world through the eyes of perfume, purses, and shoes. You have to see the world through the other person's eyes. That's the sincerity, because you're filling each other up with God's love working through you. Sincere, sacrificial, sacrificere. You are to make things holy. I mean, you heard it yesterday, again from the bishop's homily. We are not blessing your marriage. We are, but the church is. You are blessing each other's marriage. You literally, for the first and probably like exclusive time, acting as the priest of your ceremony. You are sanctifying each other by your yes. That's what makes things holy. When you give yourself to the other the way Christ gives himself to us. And that whole understanding of service, I got to tell you, you come on a ship like this, don't you feel a little like members of the royal family? I mean, like at dinner, a guy literally, the waitstaff, he calls me Sir Leo. Sir Leo. And I did it with a Filipino accent, because so many of them are Filipinos, because they know how to serve. And I just think sometimes in very developed nations, we have become very self-serving. It's so interesting. And I'm not making any racial or classist comment in a negative way. I'm doing it in a very humble, observational, theological, truthful way, and complimentary. Most of the people who work on these ships in the service industry are coming from developing nations. Because in their humility, they know how to serve. We live in a very rich country. And that sociological wealth is affecting our minds on what marriage is. You are here to serve each other. If there is a hole in my spouse, I'm going to serve some goodness to them to complete that hole in them, obviously with Christ's love. That's kind of why I sell aprons. Available at plateandcraze.com/shop. It's the only real physical, material merch, because I want every one of you to have aprons, and mine are black and therefore slimming. But I remind you that an apron is the only thing that Jesus put on. The only thing that Jesus put on at his Last Supper. which is a theological reality of the first miracle at the wedding feast of Cana, where Jesus turned ordinary things like water for washing dishes and washing feet into what? Into what? And not just any wine. Barolo, 1997. And he didn't make just a little bit. He made a lot. And college kids are like, party with Jesus. No, he didn't do it to get you drunk. He did it to prove that in his service, he gives the best and he gives the most. We are becoming very cheap with each other, which is why on that parallel sacramental reality where water was changed into wine, and then in the last miracle, the greatest miracle, wine becomes his blood. He's showing you what he's serving you. He's serving you with himself. Serve each other with yourself. It's missing. I'm in the hospitality industry. A lot of people just think, I think your show is more of a talk show, because they've never tasted my cooking. So I got really sick and tired of hearing people like, but can you really cook? I mean, granted, you did beat Bobby Flay, season 7, episode 1. I mean, they know that, right? And only a few people have actually tasted my food. Bishops tasted some of my food before. A few couples here who've come to my culinary dinners, they've tasted my food. They can tell you, I can cook, but I usually serve a lot of wine with it, so it tastes amazing. Doesn't even matter. But it got to the point where during COVID, I was feeling the temptation of being self-serving. Anyone else feel that temptation? I did. I mean, I felt so annoyed because my whole job is to actually go and preach. I'm a missionary priest with a community of consecrated life called Voluntas Dei. I'm not a parish priest because I'm only good in small doses. So, they would kill me there in a parish. No, but I was a parish priest for many years. I'm a missionary priest, and so it's content creation, speaking, teaching, preaching, parish missions, corporate events, even secular events. Believe it or not, secular groups even invite me to come because who doesn't eat food? Right? If you have a problem with food, you got a problem. And so it's interesting that during COVID, all of my whole job was travel and large events. That's how I gained remuneration. I don't get money from the diocese, and I don't live in a religious order. As a secular institute priest, I have to work for my meals. But I also have a staff that helps me. But it grew in 2020. Can you believe it? Something good happened in 2020. During 2020, I would take a walk around the streets of Baltimore because I just wasn't afraid of air. And so I just walked around, and I realized that there were a lot of homeless people who were really hurting because there was no one to panhandle to. So I just, a few times a week started packing my car up with lunch and started giving it away, and I just prayed. And I'm like, God put it in my heart to do this on a bigger basis. And during COVID, I turned a certain age where most people would buy a convertible. I bought a food truck. And so during that time, strangely enough, I also felt that the people who needed God's love the most were ex-convicts. And so as part of my nonprofit group, I actually hire returning citizens, formerly incarcerated people. They call themselves ex-prisoners or ex-offenders. So I hire them, I give them formation, I give them a job, because I believe that if you've done your time, you are invited to the table. But not as a privileged place, but in the most privileged place, which is as a servant. And what I'm teaching our people is that service is the way to redemption. Service is the way to love. Service is the way to professing professionalism, who you really are. If you know how to serve people, you can do anything. You can do anything, which is why I encourage you to make sure that your children and your grandchildren, they know how to serve at the table. Because at that table, if you are platinggrace.com, if you really are bringing Jesus to the table, he can transform that dinner table into a desk where the greatest lessons in life are learned. And what is that lesson? How to love one another. Because in that loving, you serve people. That's kind of what I want to talk about. So I'm going to end my time because I was trained by Germans. But please know I'm going to be available to say Mass today for anyone who missed Mass because of the time zone difference. I'm going to say Mass at 5 p.m. at the conference hall where we've been having our night prayer and our rosary. So I'm going to say Mass there at 5 p.m. today. And people are like, but dinner's at 5:30. I'm a short homilist in more ways than one, okay? So we are going to have just a normal weekday Mass at 5 p.m. at that conference hall, all right? And I want to just kind of close with this because we are going to get out and enjoy. I don't even know where I am, to be honest with you. We're going to go enjoy Honduras. Marriage is something that I have kind of thought that I was going to get into. Got out of their plans because I was trying to think theologically. I didn't want to listen to what the world had to offer me, but I started integrating inspiring information. I had to practice purity as a spiritual parent. And then I had to be sincere in my sacrificial service. I feel very much like you, and it's because, do you know that the wedding bed is the couple's altar? That's why if you go to Rome with me on a pilgrimage, available at platinggrace.com/travel, I'll take you and I'll show you the canopy over St. Peter's, which is basically the canopy that a couple would have on their bed, their wedding bed. And why? Because when husband and wives give themselves to each other in love, without any inhibition, the potential of life comes forth. And that's why that altar is a wedding bed, where Jesus gives himself to church, church gives herself to Jesus, and what happens when you give yourself to each other? Love happens. And I see that so beautifully when I do weddings for my couples. In fact, one that I did just in Florida 2 weeks ago was for a Catholic, very good practicing Catholic, and he's in the military. Thank God for a military. And he's just a good-looking kid, and he's disgustingly healthy and tall. I hate him with a Christian love. Really, no, but he married the most beautiful woman who is non-Catholic, not even baptized. And so technically, you're not supposed to have a sacramental marriage with the sacraments, a wedding ceremony with Mass. But you know what the girl did? Because she was so inspired with information, she was learning how to be Catholic. She goes, I want to have a Mass. Even though I can't receive communion now, I want to have a Mass. It makes me hungry for that union with him. So anyway, I did that. And so at the wedding rehearsal, it's so cute. He's standing there and I'm standing there. All the groomsmen, all the bridesmaids are there. And I look over at him and I go, you excited? This is under the breath without a microphone. I go, you excited? He goes, yeah, man, I'm so excited right now. And I said, well, guess what? You're going to see a glimpse of heaven. And I say, I invite the congregation to please rise. It's the cue for the organist. He goes, The door opens up and she comes out with her dad. And I know he saw a glimpse of heaven. Because the first words out of his mouth were, whoa. And she comes up, and right before they get to the altar, and I start with the official prayers, I said, I think you're marrying the right guy. And I know you're marrying the right guy. And she goes, I know I am too. And I said, no, let me tell you why. Because in the sacristy, right before we came out, I quizzed him. That's what every groom wants right before marriage, is a quiz. And I said to him, hey, dude, how do you know that she's the right one? And he gave this beautiful answer. It's so sincere. Gentlemen are real. Just find one for your granddaughter or your daughter. And my nephews are available. I said, do you know what your most important job is? Because they took my marriage class and they bought my book. Available. So anyway, they bought the book. So he knew. I said, what's your most important job in this marriage? Sociologically, guys would say, provide for my wife, protect her. I'm like, from what? Bears? I mean, what are you protecting her from, right? He knew what the answer was. He said, oh, I know the answer to this. My most important job in marriage is get her to heaven. That's your job. And it just shows the truth when I met a man who showed me God's love. I was invited to anoint a man who was dying. And, as priests, we have that great privilege to be with people at their last moments. And this man, he was invited to a nursing home, which is a weird place to find God. Isn't it sad that families are getting smaller and nursing homes are getting bigger? Anyway, but I talk about that in one of my books, and that's another story. But I walk in, and of course, you know what a nursing home smells like. You know, that hard. And when I got there, you know, he was actually sitting on a porta potty. How romantic. And he had tubes attached to him, and he was breathing heavy. He couldn't talk very well. But the whole thing he did was talk about his wife, who died 3 weeks prior. And I think that he was in the nursing home because he was dying of a broken heart. Because he had been married to her for 56 years. And I was so amazed by his devotion to his wife. And when I gave him communion and I gave him the anointing and I just said goodbye and I said, thank you for sharing me your love for your wife and for your family and for God. And he says, okay, Father Leo, no problem. And I was ready to leave. He goes, hey, Father Leo, wait. Call this number. Call it. And called. I thought he wanted to talk to his kid, so I just dialed the phone for him. I give it back to him. He goes, no. Listen to it. And he had this look on his face. And I'm like, what number did I call here, right? And but I listened to it, and the phone rang about 6 times, and then an answering machine kicked up. It was like, this is the Giamari residence. No one can take your call. Leave a message. Beep. And I'm looking at him, and his breathing gets heavy, and tears start coming down his eyes. And I'm like, and then he explained, I bought an answering machine a couple months ago, and I left a message. My wife didn't like it. So she changed it. And I'm so glad she did. Because I call that number every night and listen to the voice of the woman I love. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to close with this. If you are looking at your life and your marriage through the lens of the church and God's, which is God's sacrament on earth, you're going to find a love that will literally take you out of this world where marriage never ends. God bless all.